Good evening, everyone. It's lovely to see, or at least sense, you in this virtual room. My name is Dina Romero, and I'm the Cabinet Member for Children, Young People, Communities and Culture in Bath and North East Somerset Council. I'm also the Chair of the Bath and North East Somerset Race Panel, which I hope gives some indication how seriously we in Bath and North East Somerset take race equality. About 18 months ago, I chaired a series of webinars, including with young people, focusing on race discrimination following the murder of George Floyd. In the webinars with young people, I was struck by the repeated concern that young people are still experiencing discrimination in their lives, including at school. There was a feeling that more work could be done in and with schools. So I am delighted that schools have taken on this challenge and are now ready to launch the Bath and North East Somerset Race Equality Charter for schools. I would like to thank the schools, partners and young people who have contributed so much to get to this point, the launch of the Charter. The Charter's aims are to provide schools with a consistent and robust framework to demonstrate commitment to eliminating racism, promoting race equality and cultural diversity, to help identify and address issues and inequalities, and to achieve lasting improvements in relation to race equality. I am joined by a number of panelists who I'll introduce in turn as we move through tonight's webinar. The webinar is structured into distinct sections of about 10 minutes each. In these, we'll hear more about the Charter, an overview of support services to schools, a school perspective, and lived experience stories, including from young people. This meeting is being recorded and will be available to view on the Council's YouTube channel following tonight's presentation. I would now like to hand over to Jason Pegg, who is the Manager of Black Families Education Support, to give an overview of Bath and North East Somerset's Race Equality Charter for schools.
Thank you, Dina. Welcome to the launch of the Race Equality Charter for schools. It marks the culmination of some excellent partnership work since the idea for the Charter was first conceived almost a year and a half ago now. The Charter has been developed for schools by the B&NES Race Equality and Hate Crime Task Force Partnership, a partnership of organisations made up of representatives from B&NES Council, local schools, Stand Against Racism and Inequality, the Black Families Education Support Group, Off the Record, and Avon and Somerset Police. As Dina said, the Charter is crucially informed by the views and experiences of Black and minority ethnic young people in Bath and North East Somerset. This includes the findings of a survey of 1,700 secondary school students on their experiences of hate crime at school, which highlighted the importance of addressing racism and racial harassment in school, along with the numerous films and webinars that were made in response to the Black Lives Matter movement, which showed young people exploring their experiences and observations of racism in Bath, the importance of the Black Lives Matter movement, and the lasting impact of racism and their opinion on what now needs to happen in schools. So we've worked hard to ensure that the elements of the Charter are built on the foundations of their views and experiences, and that it will address their concerns effectively. For example, young people have highlighted to us the importance for them of increasing the number of Black staff and role models in schools, for schools to respond effectively to racist incidents, and to ensure that all areas of the school curriculum are inclusive and representatives, and for teachers to be trained to understand the key issues around race and racism. So why is the Charter important? There's a number of reasons. The first one is there's a legal and moral duty on schools to tackle racial discrimination and promote race equality, cultural diversity, and good race relations. Secondly, racism and racial inequality in education continues to be a serious problem, and locally, Bath and North East Somerset has been at the top of league tables for racial inequalities in relation to school exclusion and persistent absence. To respond also to the experiences and views of Black and minority ethnic young people who have spoken out during the last year. It's also important to send a clear message that schools take race equality and racism seriously and are now taking appropriate action. Another important reason is that it ensures a consistent approach to addressing the issue of race in education across all schools in Bath and North East Somerset. and to provide a framework that supports schools to identify and respond effectively to issues of race and racism in education. And lastly, it's important to bring about change. I want to move on now to some of the contents of the Charter. Hopefully you will have all been able to see a copy. And during the writing of the Charter, we involved and consulted extensively with stakeholders. And this is one of the key strengths behind its development and one of the main reasons for its success. The involvement of schools, staff and their students at all stages of the work. The Charter basically lists 12 commitments which aim to cover all areas of school life in relation to challenging racism and promoting race equality and cultural diversity. This includes the creating of an inclusive ethos and anti-racist school environment, committing leadership and government to champion and prioritise race equality, teaching a curriculum that represents our ethnically diverse society, and strengthening practice to tackle racist incidents effectively, training staff in relation to race equality, and recruiting a diverse workforce, working with key local partners and communities, and ensuring policies and practice in relation to behaviour and attendance are fair and equal for all ethnic groups. And lastly, promoting equality of opportunity with all students able to aspire and achieve to the best of their potential. As such, the Charter aims to provide schools with a robust and consistent framework which they can then use to enable them to identify issues relating to race and racism and develop appropriate actions to address them effectively. So how do schools sign up to the Charter and what support's going to be available? Well, schools can sign up to the Charter through the dedicated council website. And as signatories to the Charter, schools are able to then make a public statement of their commitment to challenging racism and racial harassment. All signatories will be offered ongoing support and guidance to help them understand and implement the Charter effectively. And the support accompanying the Charter will aim to provide guidance, advice and examples of good practice and resources for schools who have signed up to the Charter, to support them to take action and achieve their commitments. Schools will also be supported to audit their current practice in relation to the Charter, both to assess what they're already doing effectively and how they're going to develop and implement actions for the future to strengthen their approach to race equality. The launch of the Charter doesn't mark the end of our work. It marks the start of the beginning of our partnership, a partnership to achieve lasting and positive changes in relation to race equality within the education system across Bath and North East Somerset. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you very much, Jason. Yes, we've got time for possibly one question. We've got quite a tight schedule today, so I'm just seeing if there are any questions. What I would suggest, if people do have any comments or questions, if they put them in the chat, we may not be able to answer them during this webinar due to time constraints, but we will endeavour to make sure you get an answer to that question, if indeed it is a question, following the webinar. So thank you once again, Jason, for your contribution. I'd now like to move on to the next part of our webinar, which is the overview of services providing support to schools. And I'd like to ask Jason to stay and invite Alex Rakes, who is the Director of Stand Against Racism and Inequality, and Phil Waters, who is the Director of Off the Record, and also Sergeant Jonathan Raisey, who is from Avon and Somerset Police. So if you are all here, I see all four of you now. I will hand over to you to talk us through your contribution, please. Thank you.
So I believe I'm going first, is that right? Great, thank you. Welcome everybody. I'm so glad to be here for the launch of the Race Equality Charter for Schools. As Jason said, this comes after a lot of fantastic collaborative working, and we're also excited that this has now become a reality. I've just got 2 minutes to tell you about SARI as one of the collaborative partners, but more importantly, as a local service to all of you to support you to fulfil this charter along with some of our partners. So for those of you who don't know, Stand Against Racism and Inequality, we are your local hate crime charity, and we're doing a lot of work to promote race equality and other types of equality as well. This very short slideshow is available to all of you to be sent out to you. And I do encourage you all to check out our social media and to check out SARI's website to find out more. How are we there to support those of you here this evening? It depends on if you're a school, an agency, or a member of the community, a family, or a child or young person. We are there for all of you in different ways. Our primary and frankly the most important service to SARI is our casework service, providing a free service for victims of any type of hate crime, and racist incidents are the highest reported type of hate crime coming to us. But we are there for agencies to help you. Hopefully, not only do you sign up to the charter, you start to action it, and we can offer you training. We offer free twilight sessions to you as part of our national lottery funded service, free twilight sessions of training for staff, which can seriously help you achieve some key aspects of the charter. We provide consultancy. We also provide assemblies, classroom sessions, one-to-one empowerment sessions for children and young people, be they victims, or indeed if they've perpetrated incidents, we have non-judgmental one-to-one sessions for them as well. And if you are a family out there, or if you know anyone indeed who's suffering any type of hate crime or incident or abuse, then please come to us for our free, confidential, person-centered support. And we are staffed and led by a board of people with lived experience of racism and other types of hate crime. So we really get it. Thank you very much. Next, I think I will be introducing Phil Walters from Off the Record.
Thank you, Alex. That's great. And just to echo everything Jason and Alex have already shared, this has been a fantastic piece of work to be a part of. So I'm Phil Walters from Off the Record. We're based in Bath and North East Somerset. We exist exclusively for young people. So we support children and young people up to the age of 25, and our primary purpose for being involved in this, I guess, is our very person-centered young person emotional health and well-being service that provides young people with a safe space to reach out for help. We have counsellors based in every secondary school across Bath and North East Somerset, and we very much provide an open door within our community settings. So we've got a service based in Bath, Midsummer Norton and Keynsham, where children and young people can access our service. It's a free service, and it offers both listening support and counselling support. So the main access point for that is through our website, or if a child or young person in the school needs to engage in our service, there's internal mechanisms within each of our schools. And I guess from our perspective, we're really working hard to champion the causes and the voices of young people. So we've got a really active participation group at Off the Record that supports us to ensure that we're enabling young people to have their voices heard where they need it. So we work very closely with SARI, we work very closely with Black families and other services across BANES to make sure that those children and young people are having their voice heard. And we're proud partners. We've also got a specialist LGBT service, which is still exclusively supporting those children and young people, of which Black and minority groups are represented within there as well. So please do look out for us, and if we can be of any service to both schools or children and young people directly, then please do get in touch. I think I'm going to hand over to Jason to talk about Black families.
Great, thanks Phil. Many of you will know the Black Families Education Support Group, and we've been around, I think we're coming up to our 30-year anniversary. And so we've been providing services that are all aimed at promoting race equality and addressing racism in the education system for nearly 30 years. We've got a wealth of experiences, and you'll know some of the services that you've already kind of used from us. Obviously, we provide an advice and advocacy service for parents. We run a supplementary school for Black and minority ethnic young people, and we provide one-to-one mentoring support for young people in schools. Part of our work as well is strategic, and a lot of that work has kind of come to fruition tonight in the launch of this charter. And also we work with schools to offer them support in relation to policy and practice around race equality in education, and help them to kind of negotiate and navigate the issues that can kind of arise in what is a complex area. I think, as I said previously, that this isn't the end of our work. It's the beginning of a partnership with schools, and we see that relationship with schools as crucial to the success of this charter going forward. And as part of that, one of the kind of bits of work that we'll be doing and the service and support we'll be offering will be to work individually one-to-one with schools. So to provide a kind of, I suppose, an introductory session to the charter, just so we can kind of work with schools so schools can understand what those commitments are, can start to audit their current practice, and can start to kind of identify the commitments and the elements of the charter that they want to prioritise going forward, and develop an action plan to help them implement those commitments effectively. So obviously when you're signing up to the charter, we'll know who's signed up, and then you can then contact us for that kind of introductory session. And it's not the end of the support as well. So going forward, we hope that in a year's time, we'll probably be coming back and doing another webinar where we'll be showcasing some of the best practice that schools have kind of adopted or implemented throughout this year. So we can all learn from each other, I suppose, about the great work that schools are kind of putting to help implement the charter effectively. Okay, so I think that's the end of my little speech. I'm going to hand over to Jonathan, one of our other key partners from Avon and Somerset Police.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, attending from Avon and Somerset Police. I think the charter is absolutely necessary as we move forward in current climates. I think from a policing point of view, we can all understand how difficult it is for schools dealing with bullying, harassment, and particularly when there's elements of racism or other types of hate. No school or no school staff really want to criminalise kids that they're looking after. At the same point, they're also not trained investigators or necessarily always particularly skilled at what they need to do when looking at a report from a student of this nature. So I think this charter is really going to help, and obviously Avon and Somerset Police will be part of that journey as well. The main thing that we offer is our local policing teams, and each school has a single point of contact, which is there for a number of reasons. Firstly, to provide educational inputs, and again, we got a large number of partners that are also providing similar or complementary services as well. So we will come in and speak with children. It's important that we're visible and present on school grounds, beginning of school, end of school, and sometimes during the school day. That's an availability for people to come and engage with us, for us to try and deter any offending at particularly at the entrance and egress of school. We're also there to support and advise teachers and other staff at the schools. So if they're dealing with an incident, they're not sure whether it's a police matter or something that they should be dealing with within the school, then those single points of contact should always be there and available to give some advice. But also to engage with offenders as well. So there will be times when it's absolutely right for police to have an involvement with a young person that's committed crimes related with hate. We will always look, first of all, at educational outcomes and changing that young person's behaviour. For young people, it isn't so much about punishment, it's more about changing that understanding, working with those individuals, and particularly in situations where there's violence, we have a violence reduction unit which can offer one-to-one ongoing support with that young person to change their perspectives on life as well. And sometimes within those outcomes, it might be that it's to a wider group than just that individual, but we go to the whole year group as well. So look to change perspectives from people. What I'd love to see from this charter is that other people, witnesses, are coming forward and supporting victims, and that those individuals shouldn't have to bear the brunt themselves of having to report to schools or to police or whoever to get their voices heard and to stop that offending behaviour. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think that's been really interesting to get that insight into the work that you do as service providers in terms of the support you give to schools, and also to hear a little bit about how you have worked on the charter as well. And I have made a note, I think it was from Phil, who is looking forward to a webinar next year on the implementation of the charter. I'm sure we'll schedule that into the council's diary almost straight away. So thank you very much for that. I'd now like to move on to Andrew Greenough, who is the head teacher at Ralph Allen School, to get a little bit more information about the school's perspective. So over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Dina. Firstly, I'd just like to say how much I've enjoyed working with the task force. Sometimes when you come onto groups, it can be a lot of talking, but actually this group is a group of committed people, passionate about changing things, desire to make a difference, and solution focused, which I could very much chime with. You know, all our time is precious, but people gave up their time and worked together to do it, and I've really enjoyed that. The other thing I'd like to say is the charter that we're all committing to is not something that we shall be beaten up with or said, are you doing these things? It's actually a way to move forward in a very trusting way and through support. And it's work that all schools have been doing. So it's great that this work has culminated in this group of people, exactly what's required. Schools are such fundamental parts of the development of young people. And if there are issues that happen in school, these can cause a detrimental effect. These can be there forever. And it's often, it can be issues around race or other things that we have to address. And the figures that Jason was talking about, there are issues. And I think that's the first thing, is that it's not right. And I think people are acknowledging that. 2 sixth formers came and spoke in assemblies in the first term. And they talked about their experience after the Euro 21 final, when 3 young black players missed penalties, and the racial abuse that happened online after that. But these 2 students were actually, they explained how they were frightened about, they'd watched the game somewhere else, and how they had to then travel, and how they were perceived in the community when they were walking back to their own homes. And I think that that's very powerful to understand. And actually, I asked Marvin, who's going to be speaking later, to come in and talk to the staff. And Marvin spoke about his experiences and the racial abuse that he experienced while at Ralph Allen as a student. And a lot of the staff cried. He's talking later, I'll just preempt you, might need tissues. But just, it's that understanding that society is broken. It's not utopian. There are things that are wrong. Schools are in society. It's not right. And to actually just, the inequality exists, and how do we then change it? The things that we look at is how we promote these things. And what we want is, we want students to be able to come to school, be proud of who they are, be celebrated for whoever they are, and that be throughout everywhere. But also to feel safe, to know that when things are wrong, then they can report it, to feel that it will be dealt with, and there are consequences and sanctions across. We've got 2 equalities working parties. We have a group of staff that do it and work throughout, but we also have a very powerful student body, which are 30 to 50 students, and about 35 turn up each week, and they talk about equalities. And it's interesting, their point of view is, this is their words, they want to make a difference for the future students that are coming to Ralph Allen and other schools at the same time. But they recognise that there's some things that are right, some things that aren't. And it's young people that can obviously make that difference. There's also a lot of work that we've got to do on curriculum, and that's been highlighted recently about how antiquated it is, how unrepresentative it can be. But as all schools are representing is, we own our curriculum. We can do what we want within most guidelines. So auditing that curriculum, as the Charter says, is a lot of work that's gone into schools, looking at a true diverse representation. So everyone can see from people different diversities and what they've contributed to society, not what's happened in the past, which is middle-aged white men who make most decisions. That's not the case, but that often is reflected. So that has to change. Schools also work with the agencies that have spoken at the same time, and SARI and Black families have been particularly helpful to schools, either mentoring students or often in advice, in areas. It's great to talk and ask what's going on. But our culture needs to be that it celebrates individuality and that people are proud of. And I have to think, about this school and myself and say, is it inclusive? Does it promote diversity? Does staff have unconscious bias? And the answer is yes, they do. So schools have to work on addressing that and being aware of what you do unconsciously. I think that the thing with all the schools is we have ambition. We want it to be better. And I think that's the difference. Schools should be a place of celebration for who they are. They should be safe. Everyone should be proud of that. Things are going to go wrong. Things aren't right. But I think we all need to have that desire to recognise, not to hide it, not to put it under the carpet and say it's an issue. It's about saying, this is wrong. Why is it wrong? What are we going to improve? And I think it's fantastic to see people coming to better to improve the lives of young people. And I think a real purpose to do that. So as everyone has said, the Charter is the starting point. A lot of work's gone into that, but it's now that commitment from all the schools, how we use it, and how we're open to challenge on it to make things better in the future. Okay.
Thank you very much, Andrew. That was really, I think, quite inspiring, and also a very honest perspective as well. I'd like to call Marvin Richardson Grubb up next, who is a teacher at Mendip Studio School, who I'm sure would like to share his own lived experience.
So first of all, thank you to Andrew for your kind words. Start from the beginning. I was born in 1972. I was born as Marvin. I was born in Midsom Norton, Radstock area. Went to school in Radstock, and everything was okay, I guess, until I was 6. So I'm both my grandparents. One of my grandfather's Jamaican, and my other grandfather's Sicilian. Both my grandmothers are English. So everything was fine until I got to about 6 at school. I didn't see myself as different. Nobody else saw me as different. And then what happened is, when I was about 6 years old, one child came in and pointed out the difference and called me a name which was quite common in the 80s, 70s, which you don't really hear anymore. I won't say it, but called me that. And I remember being totally shocked. But that seemed to sort of like spread through the school rapidly. And I remember not being able to play football or join in games and being pushed aside. I was made to feel absolutely separate to everyone else, different. I remember going home. Yeah, I remember going home most nights and crying myself to sleep, hoping that I'd wake up the same colour as everyone else. I thought there was something wrong with me. Anyway, I went out to play one day, and I got racially abused, which was commonplace. I happened to go into the house and tell my dad. And I remember my dad said to me, you go back outside, son, and you sort it out. And if you don't sort it out, you're going to be running all your life. So I went out and had an altercation and tried standing up for myself. And it was at that stage where it got so hostile, I needed to learn to defend myself. I mean, my dad was an England boxer at the time, which was helpful. And in the 70s, early 80s, you've got to bear in mind, I was getting called names at schools in front of teachers and nothing would be done. So I had to join a boxing club and I was made to box from 6 years old on. I didn't like it. I didn't particularly like the sport, if that's what you want to call it. But I absolutely knew that I needed to learn how to defend myself because there was attacks coming from everywhere. And as I got older, that was coming from adults. Adults were parents were not letting me in their house. All sorts of overt racism was commonplace. There wasn't a week that went by that I wasn't in some sort of physical altercation, and most days I would be called names and racially abused. That was the norm. It was a really, really hostile environment. Then I moved to Bath about 9, and it got a little bit better because there were a few more people of colour, but not a lot. And what sticks in my mind is going into Bath, and they used to have the precinct in town outside a shop called Eric Snooks. And I remember being absolutely terrified to walk past there because there'd be this massive gang of skinheads with Dr. Martens up to their knees. They used to have yellow laces, which was meant they wanted to beat up people from, should we say, Asian background, and red laces meant that they wanted to beat people up from a Caribbean black background. Well, I used to have to be very, very careful of the ones with the yellow laces because they thought I was Asian, because they didn't actually realise that there was mixed race, and you know, it wasn't a commonplace. So I remember being absolutely terrified of that. Ralph Allen, I had a torrid time really, and it really affected my education because I wasn't particularly interested in my education. I was interested in being accepted and getting through the day without being racially abused or attacked. The irony now that I'm sat here in front of you as a teacher on this race panel and being in charge of PSHE is absolutely unbelievable. It almost makes my lived experiences worthwhile because I'm able to share them with children, and I'm able to share them with this new generation of children who, which I say majority, 99.999%, are absolutely against any form of racism, any form of disrespect, cultural disrespect, and are very, very, very open and respectful. Has racism got better? To my mind, yes. It's not acceptable to racially abuse people now in the street. The police have just said, you know, if their children are involved in some sort of a hate crime, you know, that becomes a police matter. I mean, that is a massive, massive step forward. It's become more dangerous because it used to be overt. You could see it, you could see where it was coming from, you knew where it was. Yet I believe that now it's covert and it's hard to pick it out. So in the last 22 years, I've been overtly racially abused twice. I was racially abused at Morrison's shopping because there were two people behind me making monkey noises, thinking it was funny as I walked around. It's very difficult for me to walk away from that, but I had to. And actually in July, I went to a country pub with a colleague from work, and somebody said that I was nothing but an N-word as I walked to the bar. Now that was quite shocking. I remember I've been quite stunned as he called me this N-word. But you know what? It was the white people in the pub that stood up and protected me and defended me. That's what I want from the children that go to our schools. That they won't just be bystanders. They won't just stand by and listen to racism. A lot of children are hearing it from parents, grandparents. And it's about making sure that they do not accept it anymore. They know it's wrong. They do not hate. And it's our job as educators to make sure it stays that way. And this race charter goes a long, long, long way to ensuring that we, as a school, and we're not just a school, we're part of the Midsummer Norton Schools Partnership. There's 29 schools that have signed up to this, from the CEO down. This is right on top of the agenda. The trust circular came round today. You need to look at this. You need to watch this. This is important. And that is fantastic. as I say, I think when I got to about 21, I remember wondering what it was all about. And I remember just thinking, why do people hate me? I thought it was my problem. I thought there was something wrong with me. And then it dawned on me when I got to about 21, 22, they hate me without even knowing me. And I say to the children, how can you hate someone without even knowing them? I mean, hate is a terrible thing as it is, but how can you hate someone without even knowing them just because of their difference? And I try to let children know that. We want to keep them open-minded, we want to keep them respectful, we want to stop them from hating, and we want to encourage them that our diversity is actually our strength, and that just because a person looks different to you doesn't mean that they're separate. That's it for me.
Thank you, Marvin. That, as ever, was incredibly moving, and also quite shocking as well, that some of what you have told us, we kind of imagine would have happened, you know, in the past, but to hear that it is still an issue now, I think is very troubling. So thank you for that. I'm now going to move on to the parts called Young People's Stories, so we can hear something from some of our young people who are attending secondary school. I just need to check who we have coming in. I believe we've got Ashana, Israel, and David. So I'm hoping that they are all here and they will all be able to join the webinar right away. And what I will also do is I will alert everyone, because we seem to have gone through our sort of timetabled events remarkably fast. I am hopeful that we will have some opportunity after we've heard from the young people to answer some of the questions that I know are in the chat. So if I can ask, as I said, Ashana, Israel, and David to come forward, that would be great.
Hi, Dines. Rob here. I'll just say we've lost David through to internet. So yeah, Rob from Black Families here. Thank you. I'll just introduce Shana and Israel in a minute. But I'd say also, just to add to a lot of what's been said, an amazing achievement, I think, the Race Equality Charter, in a context, I think, which Marvin illustrates a massive transformation in society. David also mentioned about society, and I think that's one of the things I've noticed a lot, is that in schools, I've got no question that schools and teachers, etc., are willing to make a difference. I don't doubt that at all on the whole. So I think what this tool represents is what this charter represents is a tool, because I think often it's very difficult to know what to do or how to do it, and it does represent this framework where certain types of work can be kept on top of. Now, as well as to make a difference, as well as the work that, say, SARI and the police might do around incidents, I think there's also the fact that, as David said, racism is in our society, and there's external, but it's also internal. So stuff around curriculum and stuff around expectations and empowerment areas. I think Black Families, the type of work we also do, as Jason mentioned, with including mentoring and supplementary school, is about building that internal resilience and also providing alternative options around curriculum expectation and such like. So I'd like also, as part of this development, we've had a lot of conversations that fed into it. And I think after, these issues have been going for a long time, but they do still exist. So, I mean, can we invite Israel first to say something maybe in response? I know Israel had questions. So you have questions or comments, or as it comes, Israel, can we invite you to hear your voice about what you've heard so far and what we've discussed?
Yeah, hello. I would just like to say, yeah, I'm Israel. I'm with Black Families, and I'm very excited and interested to see what's going to happen with the charter, and yeah, what schools are going to do with it. But I've got some questions on it, because as a person of colour, I've experienced and gone through situations, and it makes you feel dehumanized and different, and it's just not okay. It's not very nice. So I just have some questions, and they're aimed at anybody who could answer or thinks they could answer. My first question is, how are the schools going to keep up and implement the points in the charter?
So with that question, would it be useful if I brought back Andrew from the Ralph Allen School, and also Marvin, who could perhaps give a little bit of sort of information to help with that question?
Yeah, is that right? Yeah, thanks, Israel. Yeah, I think the simple answer to this, although there's a lot of work behind it, is that we talk to the students in our schools. I think that's the most important thing, is your voice, your experience is yours. We don't have it. We think we can empathize, but we don't go through it like you. So I think that all the schools keeping an open dialogue with the students and a place that they can talk, report, say what they need to say is necessary for us to see how it's implemented, how it's working. Because it's just some words, but actually it's not. It's actually how you and how the young people feel in the schools that is the aim of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I would say to you, Israel, I'll tell you how it's going to be implemented, because everyone in our MAP from the top down are dedicated to changing the future and changing the lives for children like you. It breaks my heart that, what are you, 14?
Yeah.
You're 14, that you've had to go through some of the things that I've had to go through. Yeah, it breaks my heart. And just to hear you speak like this, and this is going to be recorded, and this is going to be talked about and shared, and we're not just launching this charter and forgetting about it. Yeah, we're listening to young people like you and what you've had to go through, and I know really well what that feels like. We're dedicated to implementing it and making sure that it makes a difference in people of colour's lives, people who are different lives, in minorities' lives. Because inevitably, we're not on two different teams. It's not people of colour and white people. We're all on the same team. And that's the most important message I try and get across to children. We're not separate. We are on the same team.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Marvin. So Israel, you had another question.
Yeah, I mean, this is also kind of directed at those two, but also anybody else. How are you going to train staff and anybody who's going to try and enforce this charter? How are you going to train those people?
Okay, well, if I ask Andrew to come back, as he's a head teacher, and I'm sure we'll be able to say how that training is already coming forward.
Yes, thanks again, Israel. Yeah, I think that there's two areas we're looking at. One is that it's about the curriculum and about everyone owns that, and looking at how that can be implemented differently to represent a more diverse background. But the other thing is that we're starting on, we haven't done it yet, is work on unconscious bias. It exists. My upbringing is different to yours, and that's made part of who I am, and the same for every other person. We're different, but the experiences in our lives growing up make us have certain decisions, often without thinking about them. And I think it's important that staff start to realise that that's a thing. They don't mean to do it, but they do. So it's looking about what their bias is and then how they can support. And as Marvin says earlier, is that people are dedicated to this. And as Rob says, everybody who works in schools wants to do the right thing. I have got to make sure that, you're right, the staff are trained correctly and do it so they deliver.
Thank you, Andrew. And also just going to ask Alex to come in as well, as Stand Against Racism and Inequality seems a very relevant organisation.
Yeah, thanks, Israel. That is such a brilliant question, and that's exactly, we don't want this charter just to be you know, paper. It needs to actually move to action. So when we start our schools to sign up to it, we want them to also make sure they do, you know, evidence actions. And one of the big actions is training. So SARI, we're providing, we've managed to get funding into the area from National Lottery, not just to do casework for people who are suffering incidents, but to actually do preventative work, which includes training for schools. And we're offering free twilight sessions for schools because that's the time that most teachers can have their training, just after the school day. That's particularly focused around hate crime and racist incidents. But also, I think it'd probably be good to bring in Black families, Jason and Rob, because they're going to be doing training as well. And we're already doing quite a lot of training between us as organisations around unconscious bias, whilst it can be conscious and semi-conscious, but unconscious bias, and around general equality and diversity as well. I know I've got Natalia in the audience. I don't know if she can be brought in to speak, but she's one of our outreach and development workers who's doing some of this training.
So I'll just check, is that possible to bring her in?
Yeah, I'll just bring her in now, Dina, just a moment.
Thank you very much, Mark. Often feels slightly longer than when you're just bringing somebody up from the audience to the stage to speak.
There we go. Okay, so Holly's now got permission to talk. She just needs to unmute.
You mean Holly or Natalia?
Oh, it's Natalia, is it? Sorry.
Natalia. But while we're waiting for Natalia to come in, we could ask Black families could say a few words because they're doing a lot of amazing training.
Yeah, as Alex says, we're going to be providing training, and the main area, Israel, will be around implementing the Charter. I think, as Andrew already said from Ralph Allen, schools are already doing a lot of work, and we've said that schools are very responsive to the ideas that are in the Charter, but it doesn't mean that they're experts about it. And there's a lot of points in that Charter. I think the one point you were talking about is challenging all racist incidents, bullying and harassment, and taking them seriously and dealing with them effectively in a supportive, meaningful and empowering manner. Not all schools are doing that. So I think part of our training and what Natalia will probably also be able to help with doing with schools is making sure that schools are taking racist incidents seriously when you report them, the students are confident to report them in the knowledge that they'll be supportive, empowered and signposted to support organisations, and that teachers will respond to it and take it seriously and will have the experience and knowledge to know how to deal with that effectively. That's just one of the commitments. There are 11 others that we hope to obviously provide some training for schools so that they can implement that Charter effectively. And 12 months from now, we'll be sharing some of that good practice, and you'll be able to come back and ask the very same question to the very same schools.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So do we now have Natalia?
Hi,
Able to speak?
hi, I'm here.
Thank you, Natalia. So could you just reintroduce yourself? I know Alex did say who you were.
Hi, everyone. My name's Natalia, and I'm the Outreach Development Worker for Stand Against Racism and Inequality. And I cover the areas of B&NES and North Somerset. And as Alex mentioned, I deliver the free teacher twilight training sessions, and they do have a focus around hate crime, but as we know, hate crime and hate incidents come from a place of prejudice, and this is exactly what we're trying to tackle, whether that be through, unconscious bias or knowing how, equipping teachers to deal with these incidents confidently. What I've seen through doing them for 6 months, these sorts of training sessions, is that what a lot of people struggle with is addressing these issues with some confidence, and to make sure that they're supporting everybody involved, whether that be the young person and the family, and also if it's someone that's perpetrated something, making sure that they understand that it's not acceptable, and just kind of making sure that there's learning around it, and that schools work in a more preventative way, you know, and have more activities around diversity and inclusion and why it's important, and how fruitful it really is for our society. So these trainings are really planting the seed for schools. And luckily, like Alex said, we've got this funding for 4 years. So hopefully we can kind of be in partnership with many of the schools, primary and secondary, across the BANES area for the next 4 years.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Okay, so I'm going to move back to Israel, and I'm going to ask, you can have one more question, if you have one more question, and then I think we'll need to talk to Ashiana as well. So Israel.
I did have one more question, but it was just answered. So yeah, I'll pass on to Ashiana now, and thank you for listening.
That's lovely. Thank you very much, Israel. Ashiana, are you...
Hello.
Hi. So I don't know if you also had questions that you wanted to be answered, or if you wanted to give a sort of an insight into, into your life.
Well, I'm 15, and I would just like to address the fact that I've noticed that none of the leadership from my school has not attended today, and I'm a bit upset about that, because I feel like my school needs a lot of help when it comes to this.
Okay, well, I can make sure that that your particular school, is that we point them in the direction of this webinar so they can hear that concern from you direct. I won't ask you to name them now, but if after the webinar you can let me know which school, and then we can make sure that they do fully understand the impact that their presence or lack of presence here has. So do you want to share something of your own experiences then?
Yeah, sure. So since I started in secondary school, I've been the one to be able to push getting Black history into the curriculum at my school. But I brought in a book by Vashti Harrison about little leaders, that said about the women, strong women that were like they're really important to history, and my book got dismissed, got turned down. I asked one of my teachers if we were going to do any Black history, because it was Black History Month, and he said I'll try and squeeze it in. And honestly, it's not something that should be squeezed in. It should be something that's there already. And if my school, if they really wanted to try and support this, they would have had that in there.
Okay. I can hear that must be very upsetting for you.
It's disappointing.
Yeah, I can certainly empathise with that. Do you think, would it be helpful? I appreciate that they may not be from your own school. Would it be helpful to perhaps have a comment back from one of our school representatives?
I
It's
have a
fine
question.
to say no. That's fine.
I have a question.
Okay, a question.
So I was wondering about if teachers were open to having students actually teach them as well. that like supports diversity, can help Black history, coming to school is like a normal thing.
So should I ask Andrew, who's the head teacher of Avon School, to come in to just to hear what his thoughts on your question?
Yeah, that'd be nice. That'd be good.
Okay, Andrew.
I'm muted, sorry. Thank you, Shana. Yeah, I think that's the ideal that we want. I mean, to have students to teach us is where we're going. Why doesn't it happen on lots of things? Because curriculums are full, there's a lot of content in there. I think what has to happen and what the charter is going to help is, this is something we have to address. Because as you're saying, it's wrong. And when I spoke earlier, I admitted that it is wrong. I think the curriculum is not diverse enough and it hasn't been forever. So it is the time to change. And I think, yes, I think it is vital that we talk to young people about it. And I would say, yes, if you come to me and say, you would like to teach us about these things, then we'd work towards that and supporting you. And I'm sure your school would feel the same. But I think it's talking to them and doing that. And, you know, I guarantee you that they want to support, as Rob and others said earlier. So talk to them, and they will.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have another question or any further comment that you want to make, Ashana?
I'd like to say that I've been at Black Families for 6 years now. And I'd say that Black Families has been really helpful in supporting me when it's come to being discriminated against. Be really helpful, like the chart, like even before the charter, it was a great place to go to talk and have advice on what to do.
Thank you. I'm sure that Rob will really appreciate your words, whilst we are all, I think, slightly upset, disappointed that you've faced the challenges that you have done. So thank you. Can I say thank you very much to Israel and Ashiana? I think it's really hard to come and speak at a webinar like this. I don't know if it's harder to speak virtually or in person, but we really appreciate you coming and talking to us. I think it really brings to life, you know, sometimes things that we only hear about, you know, or sort of hear secondhand. So as I said, it really is very much appreciated. I am aware that we're rapidly running out of time, and having said that we would have time to answer some questions, I'm not sure that we will have very much time. So I'm going to cheekily ask for John Raisey to pick up the question that Phil posed in the chat, because I think that is quite relevant, particularly following on from the speakers that we have had. And that, I think, will be probably the only question we'll get to answer in person today. But as I promised, we will endeavour to answer any questions and certainly pick up the comments following this webinar. So can I ask John to come forward, Jonathan Raisey, and pick up the question that Phil D'Souza put in the chat?
Yeah, okay, thank you, Dina. So the question was about a repeat of police incident from up in London. So I'm assuming it's referring to a young female being taken out of an exam and strip searched, which was obviously that was felt that it was linked to racism, or racism played a part in the actions of the officers. First thing to say is, to my understanding, the officers are going through misconduct procedures at the moment, and that is completely against training that we receive on searching. How could you ever justify taking someone out of an exam as a young person going through something as important as that? To me, it would have to be something massively presenting a significant threat of harm to people. So the only reason I can think is if someone said person X has got a weapon on them and they intend to use it, something like that. Taking someone out for a drug search, you can't justify it within police training. So, you know, without knowing the full circumstances of what has happened there, I can't understand why that incident has happened. Secondly, to even consider a strip search on a young person needs authority from an inspector. I can't understand any inspector giving an authority for that grounds. Thirdly, unless it's something which is urgently necessary, there's no reason why police would come onto school grounds and not engage with the school and the teachers, take representation from those teachers, potentially speak with the child's parent if you are going to be doing a search in that circumstance. So, you know, I think it's a one-off incident where say those officers are going through misconduct as a result of their choice of behaviour. We should always be listening to and mindful of the fact that these people are youths, irrespective of race, but then as well understanding, you know, the feelings of, or ensuring that we're not acting unfairly due to race as well is massive. So I can't understand what has happened up there. And yeah, I would expect a school to be robust in trying to stop any officer that was intent on that kind of behaviour, and say I can't understand why they would go into the school grounds and take those actions without engaging with the school. My understanding is from that one that the school were aware, but perhaps weren't listened to with their representation, which again, officers should be aware of the impact of their behaviours and have to justify it through human rights. And I don't believe that in that incident that was adhered to.
Okay, thank you very much, Jonathan. So my apologies that we have slightly run over, but I hope that everybody will have felt that it was perfectly right to do so, particularly when we've heard such moving stories from Marvin and also from our young people as well. So I'm just going to try and wrap this up as best I can. You know, it is quite clear from what we've heard that there is a lasting impact of racism, and we, you know, need to be doing something. It looks to me like the Bath and North East Somerset's Race Equality Charter for Schools is a step in the right direction. I think one of our speakers said it was a starting point, and I think we can all agree with that. I particularly liked a comment, and I might be paraphrasing, I apologise, Marvin, for the comments that you made around how can you hate someone because of their differences. You know, we are not separated from each other. We're all part of the same team, and I think this charter gives us the tools and gives schools the tools to really embed that kind of message as well. And I think the stories that we've heard give some rationale to having this charter too. I am very much looking forward to coming back in a year's time to hear how that charter has made a difference. How has the charter started to address those racial inequalities in schools? How has it helped to embed proper and true inclusion? How, you know, will we be able to see that there is now a consistent approach? Can schools use this properly as guidance, and, you know, and really build on examples of good practice? So I think, you know, with that promise of a webinar next year on this, I am delighted that we are now in a position where this charter for race equality in schools can be launched. And I'd like to thank everybody, first of all my panel members for being here, and also particularly the young people as well for their contributions. And finally, I'd like to thank all the council officers, so Dee Chadder, Jane de Crooks and Chris Wilford as well, for their help and support in getting to this point. So on that note, I would like to say thank you once again to the panelists and for everybody for your for attending and for your interest. And this webinar will be on our YouTube channel in due course following this following the closure of this meeting. So thank you very much, and I'd just like to wish everybody a good night.